Welcome to this very latest episode of Unleash CX, where today we'll be talking about how you can go beyond the hype of AI. And actually, we hear about AI all the time across, whether it's a technology vendor speaking about it or end organizations. Everybody's got a strategy or at least a plan around implementing AI. Today, we want to kind of drill into actually, is a lot of this just hype, or can we start benefiting today and in the future from AI when it comes to CX? So I'm delighted today to be joined by Laura Ball, who has years of experience in conversational AI. I think she spent 12 years at HSBC working on their conversational AI solution, and then most recently spent a year or so at a live person with their chatbot solution, and spent the last year working with me at Zoom in helping evangelize and lead our AI story, particularly around conversational AI. So, Laura, I'm really pleased to have you today. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about, why is this such a big thing for you, and how have you made a career out of this?
Yeah, well, thanks, Iqbal. And I think why is it such a big thing for me? We're all consumers of organisations, and I think that's first and foremost where I sort of put my CX hat is on a day-to-day basis. I'm interacting with organisations as a customer, and I think that's sometimes forgotten when we're on the flip side trying to think about how do customers contact an organisation. So I've always worked in customer experience. I was at college, I was an agent in a contact centre. I worked in Wilco back in the day before, unfortunately, that was not around anymore. And then, as you mentioned, I joined HSBC and first and foremost worked in their retail branch arm. So, face-to-face contact with their customers. And I think as a customer and as somebody that works in customer experience, it's easy to take it for granted, the types of conversations that you have and the impacts that you can have on somebody just trying to resolve perhaps a simple query, somebody that perhaps is looking at something that's a bit more emotional. In my career with HSBC, I was a mortgage advisor at one point, and that's naturally a really human and emotive conversation. And then as I moved later on into my career with HSBC into contact centres, I had a flip back to my 17-year-old self as an agent, looking at the types of communication and how we communicate is really important to drive in that value of a customer to that. If I think of myself as a consumer, I'm looking to work with organisations who are easy to work with, who get what I need to get done, who I want to remain loyal to because they've really helped me out along the way. And the latter part of my career, as I worked in the contact centres with HSBC and I worked with LivePerson, was looking at how do we balance AI and humans within that customer journey in order to, yes, deliver the objectives of a business, and they can vary, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of those metrics and things later on, but ultimately to support the end user, the consumer, to get what they need to get done in a way that is going to be right for them. So that's where albeit I'm sat on this side of the fence and I'm looking at how do we support organisations achieve a great customer experience. My hat's always thinking, if I was Laura Ball, the customer with the organisation that we're speaking to here, what does that look and feel like? And that's where I'm passionate about finding a balance.
I think that's really important, right? I've in recent podcasts, pretty much AI is a hot topic, and certainly there's a lot of content out there around this stuff. So there's a lot of noise, and that's why we kind of the topic that we've chosen here is how do we kind of go beyond actually all that noise and really kind of drill into, as you point out, we've got to look at it from the customer's lens to see how can we drive real efficiencies for the customer to deliver a great experience, but at the same time, not at the cost of the business either, right? We've got to find a way to strike the perfect balance. And at the end of the day, we know AI is here to stay forever. It's going to continue to evolve. We're seeing the impact it's having on employees within organizations and customers out there. I think that there's always a question over whether we've over-indexed on this stuff. It was interesting. I'm recently reading a report from Gartner, and they've talked about only 1% of organizations or execs within organizations globally are yet to truly understand the risks of what AI brings to their organizations. And I know we'll cover some of that a little bit later in terms of governance around this stuff. I think let's kind of kick off with how we can actually start to benefit from AI and being able to complement that experience. We know AI isn't a magic pill, and I know you and I speak about situations with organizations where we speak to have a different understanding of actually what they could achieve. So in terms of an organization starting a journey today, where's the best place to start? Somebody who's perhaps not yet started out with a conversational AI solution or even a chatbot solution. They just have a voice contact center today. Where should they begin?
So I think the trend in this topic of conversation is always to start with, let's look at data. And I think that's a real idealistic view, having lots of conversations with varying sizes of organizations globally. I think there is data there, but a lot of organizations struggle to get the depth of data that they need. So I think, when we looked at this perhaps 7 or 8 years ago, it was a case of what's your IVR data look like? And some of that was woolly because it'd be press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And then it was like, look at where your clicks are on your website and look at that data. And I think there's probably a blend here, right? So I think there's a blend of looking at what data you do have available to you as an organization and looking at where do you think there are some low-hanging fruits? Where do you think that there are traditionally FAQ style questions that we can take away from an agent, from a human response, and give that to a consumer at a time that suits them, in a modality that suits them? But I think there's a huge value as well to looking at what are your customers saying. So if there are a lot of organizations put customer surveys out at the end of a call, and as an example, or the end of a chat, what is the verbatim saying in there? We talk about AI as a customer facing tool, but how can we perhaps use generative AI to mine some of that data and look at what the customer verbatim saying around how they want to interact with an organization, and start to map and plan how you're going to introduce chatbots, conversational AI based on that data. And I think one of the sort of key themes when I've been talking to brands about this recently is they're almost waiting for an exact point when they've got all of the answers before they start. And I just don't think that's ever going to be a true reality. It's almost, you've got to be brave and start the journey somewhere with limited information, because what we know is the benefit of doing that is you start to see consumers interacting with AI, you start to then build more data, you start to then be able to move and look at the bigger picture. So for me, it's the biggest thing I think is start somewhere. If you think you have a starting point, go for it, be agile, but then continue to move and build on that based on how people are interacting with the bot and how that's starting to impact some of the metrics in your organization.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think, again, when we speak to organizations, you've got C-level putting pressure on businesses we want an AI strategy. We want to look at things more holistically. And I think that there's definitely an element of that, because that determines what technology you will be investing in and all of those things. But you've got to get a sense of actually where do we need to implement this, rather than focusing on actually we just got to have AI, because the benefits are obvious for sure, but actually you've still got to justify the investment in the technology, right? If you're going to do it, you've got to have you've got to deliver impact and benefits to the business and the end customer. And I think your point there is great, is look at the data. Yes, it's a heavy lift, but look at, as you said, look at those metrics. Let's understand what are your customers saying. Let's understand the voice of your customer through surveys, through any of your QM technology, whatever it is, to really kind of understand where are your agents potentially having to spend most of their time. So maybe serving a process which could be self-served to an extent. We come across this all the time. And that low-hanging fruit really is where you want to kind of lead with. And then you've got the ability to then, okay, well, let's build that in. Let's see if we can expose that to the consumer, and then let's start monitoring it. And I think that's the other thing, right? We talk about identifying and actually maybe executing against a quick win there. How do we ensure that the AI is performing, is actually not at the detriment of the experience for the consumer in the end? Like, what any thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's a really valid point, because I think we need to be brave when we're doing this stuff to admit that it's not the right thing, and almost pull back sometimes on where AI has been implemented and where it has been sort of causing detriment to the customer experience. And I think traditionally, you know, when I've done this in previous lives, before technology's got to the place it's got to today, it has been a heavy lift of, you know, who is your person that analyzes the data of the bot, that looks for key trends, that then feeds back into the conversation designers and the bot builders as to how to improve and manage on that. I think, you know, again, there are other ways of using generative AI technology rather than as in the customer facing bot world. And for me, it's how are we clever and utilize it to predict these trends, to tell people that are building the customer journeys, actually, you've got it wrong at this point because we're seeing this trend in this customer journey. And then to I guess, suggest where perhaps improvements could be made within the customer journey. And if that means taking that AI out and putting a human back in, then that's absolutely the right thing to do. Yeah. So I think it's I think we need to think a bit more broadly about the term AI and not just think of it as a customer facing solution, but actually where are we using it to improve the customer journey as a holistic view?
Yeah, and I think if we're discussing obviously conversational AI as one component, but there's benefits to be had behind the scenes, right? In terms of, you know, perhaps proactively you can utilize AI to automate certain things. And, you know, we talk about also how AI can help support the human agent with information, with next steps, with summarization. Some of the stuff that's already out there, we can see that these things are already benefiting the agent. So again, going back to that point around finding those key areas that can benefit from AI immediately, there's no harm in it, and actually be brave enough to be, as you say, pull back if necessary. And we see this actually all the time, is organizations perhaps have gone into quickly because they haven't designed the customer journey correctly, and then, you know, they'll either come and speak to us about help us not just actually work out what the right technology is, because I think that's secondary. The first thing is, you know, where do we implement this, and let's really understand every part of that customer journey as well. And it also depends on the use case that they want to kind of pick on in that instance. Just on your point around the balance between human and AI for a second, we know, you know, there's a mandate at the moment that by 2028, that the EU mandate that there should be a right to talk to a human in customer services, predicted by Gartner. How real do you think that is? Do you think that's just Gartner not really understanding what this is? Because it sounds like there's a fear out there that AI will replace humans. But going back to the monitoring bit, and we're seeing some organizations do this already, where you're repurposing agents to actually monitoring bots and seeing how they're performing. I think there's going to be more jobs. Like I was having a debate with my brother yesterday, and he was like, well, you know, AI is just going to replace everybody's jobs, and, you know, what are these agents going to do? Right, this can't be good for people. I think it's going to be the opposite. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity.
Yeah, and I think attending an event just last week, actually, there was a debate amongst some peers in the room around what is the end goal going to be here. So I think you know, Gartner's prediction probably is one of many differing opinions in this space. I guess from my perspective, what I think is we've already seen a change in how contact centers are structured in sort of the last 5 to 10 years, where, you know, we went through that chatbot phase of customer experience transformation, and we saw roles develop, and you know, that was our strategy at HSBC, was we take the frontline agents that know our customers best, know our processes, procedures, products, and we utilize their skill sets, their knowledge, and we develop them to be the ones that are then defining the content for the chatbots. They're then defining the conversation design. They're defining the bot building and how that works. And that's a continuous improvement process. And some of those roles will need to be defined again now with the latest advancements in the technology, because we'll be able to, you know, predict, or the AI, for example, in our solution can suggest intents that perhaps need to be built in because of the ways that customers are utilizing the technology and things. So, you know, again, it's sort of taken some of that heavy lift away from them roles, and we'll naturally start to see an evolution. So I think from a what will roles look like in the contact center, will it take away jobs? I don't think so. I think it will be a case of people will have the opportunity to upskill and to work alongside AI and define how AI will work in the contact center, in the end-to-end customer experience across an organization. And I think one thing that remains true for me, regardless of the technology, is it's customer service, customer journeys by design. And that's the key, but it's by design. So to Gartner's prediction and point around there should also always be an opportunity to speak to a human. I think we went through a wave of trying to force customers down a particular journey that benefited an organization. I think that was a real sort of pendulum swing one way. I think we then sort of overcompensated because people got chatbot fatigue and felt like they were stuck in that chatbot cycle. We saw dissatisfaction on the increase. And we then developed some sort of fear against utilizing chatbots. And, but I think we're coming back to sort of a nice level playing field now where by design, we should give customers the option to do what they choose, whether that be entry point, whether that be utilize a self-serve web journey, whether that be to utilize a bot, but we should also give them the option to change when they want to. So frictionless move out of AI to a human via multiple different modalities, if that is what a customer wants. I think that would be the nirvana end goal, because that then takes away the restriction to only communicating with AI, but it also means we don't have to be fearful of it. We can embrace it alongside human interaction.
Yeah, because we're making it comfortable for the consumer to be able to interact with AI in whichever means possible. It's always interesting. I find sometimes that having too many options as a consumer can be a little bit confusing and overwhelming. But it's just the way you kind of deliver it. It's got to be consistent across all modalities. But it should never feel like I can do task A with one form, one channel, and then to do something different, for example, refunds like that. As a consumer, there tends to be only one way of achieving that. Whether that's through submitting a form or going online, signing in, and just going through a process, rather than actually, I would just prefer to WhatsApp somebody maybe and say, I just want to organize a refund while I'm on the go. I'm not having to go into my order, sign into the website, organize a label to then arrange a refund. I'm always thinking, look, I'd rather have the option to choose whichever mode possible, but that experience has to be really consistent, and I think that's what's been lacking, hasn't it?
It is, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think, and I think the AI enhancements have supported that. I think some of that is around sort of knowledge base and content, and how do you organize that? I think traditionally we've had sort of scripted content for contact center agents versus different content if you're a branch-based worker versus different web content, all for one organization. And I think the ability to to provide a consistent approach, so a set of processes, procedures, knowledge, content that regardless of whom is delivering that, a human face-to-face, a human via telephony, or a bot, that experience for the end user remains consistent, then I think that will make a huge difference. But I think it's a challenge that organizations are still going through to get to that point.
Yeah, it's going to take time, and just I think going back to your point earlier around dissatisfaction, I mean, there isn't a week that goes by where I see reports, across news outlets around how bad customer service is, and it just continues to surprise me that we've evolved so much as people. The technology is in a completely different level, yet some say because consumer expectations are much higher than they ever were. I'm not convinced that's the case. A lot of it's down to the lack of good service that's offered by the brand or the organization, and that's why they're ending up with dissatisfied customers. But there tends to be a continued downward trend around this, and you'd think with some of the benefits we know organizations are seeing through AI, that you would expect an improvement, but we're not seeing that yet. Do you think we're close now to now pivot the other way, where actually as consumers we will start to benefit from this? Because I'm yet to. I mean, I asked all my guests about their experience, and I'm sure we'll discuss that in a minute, but I'm yet to experience the shift as a consumer. Being in the technology, speaking to organizations, we're having great conversations, we're seeing the technology, like it's amazing how things are evolving, but the consumer isn't experiencing AI. Why do you think there's such a gap right now?
I don't think the technology is the problem, if I'm honest. I think we know that technology will do what we need it to do. I feel like we're still battling the age-old process versus customer need battle. So what I mean by that is not providing the empowerment to our colleagues in an organization that are customer facing to do what they need to do to resolve for the customer. I think there's still a lot of red lines and tapes and, well, the process is the process. So I think no matter how much technology you put in play, even if it's the best technology, the most frictionless end-to-end experience, if we haven't given empowerment to frontline teams in order to resolve the customer's query in the way that they need to, then I think we're never going to win the battle. I think where we can potentially benefit from the technology to get somewhere here is by taking away the heavy lift of the repetitive work, the efficiency gains that technology can bring. We then have the ability to spend time, not reducing headcount, but spend time talking to those individuals about scenario-based examples. How do we perhaps make a decision that's moving the customer requirement forward, but not a true detriment to an organization? So I think there's definitely sort of skill sets, decision-making enhancements that we can provide our frontline teams that perhaps before they would escalate to a team manager or a department manager to make that decision. That's where I think some of the friction comes in is, we've got a process. I aren't of the ability to make, well, I've got the ability, but I'm not allowed to make that decision. I must ask my manager who asks their manager, Or do we use time that we get back from efficiency gains to upskill people and give them empowerment?
Yeah, because there's a cost associated with escalating to different processes, delaying that customer journey or resolving an issue for a customer. Certainly that for in one of my future podcast sessions, that's a topic I do want to explore, is giving freedom back to the agent. I think there's just so much value in being able to do that, as long as the agent is guided. And again, going back to how AI can help deliver that. I had a great example of this recently. I was going on holiday and I had an issue with my car rental. So I called in and I was speaking to the agent who was organizing a replacement car for me. Whilst doing that, I would have been just happy if he'd have just booked it for me and then, get on with my life. What he noticed is that the first couple of days I'm there's going to be a lot of rainfall. So he said, look, we'll arrange umbrellas for everybody that'll be traveling in the car. Just a very simple thing that now I don't know whether he's gone in and checked what the weather is and then arranged for umbrellas to be available within the car when we get there. But I just thought it was such a nice touch, is being able to offer value beyond the service that you're offering. And I think that's where I think you can start to get that pivot towards better customer service, where you're giving that level of freedom back to the agent, where they can actually offer a little bit more. Because now, genuinely, I want to go back to these guys. I want to be renting from the same company again, because of an act of kindness. That's how I've kind of seen it, right?
And if you think of it in the three pillars, I always like to look at things: agents, customers, and the organization itself and the business goals. That touches on all of them, because the agent feels great because they've been able to, one, resolve your query, but also give you that little extra personal touch. You feel great because you've resolved your issue and you're not going to get wet through, and your family aren't going to get wet through when you're there. And you're also now more loyal. So from a business perspective, they're going to see repeat business from you that perhaps, had they not resolved it in such a way, you would have gone looking elsewhere. So, if you think of it in buckets like that, I think that's how, when we're thinking about customer journeys, when we're mapping, when we're continuously reviewing, I think for me, that's just a logical way of thinking. How is what we're going to define here impacting each of those three pillars? And does it make sense?
Yeah, no. That's a good point. Look, it's so we've been talking about some great things that organizations can benefit from and then consumers through AI. Let's kind of talk about some of the kind of risks and the cons around this. Just going back to Gartner, they made a prediction in that by 2027 it will lead to the death of a customer. I think they deliberately go for these outlandish headlines just to catch people's attention, but and a lot of this is down to, they feel, if you're not controlling the Gen AI, there's obviously risks with hallucinations and what that could lead to if you're not kind of reining it back in again. There's risks there that we need to be considerate of. in your view, how real is that risk? Clearly it can get out of control, and we've seen the potential of that. We've seen some good examples in recent times, which I've called out as well. And how do we prevent? We've talked about monitoring, but is the risk as big as that, where actually it's going to lead to customer death? I mean, it seems a bit
I
crazy.
mean, extreme, doesn't it? And the choice of words are quite extreme as well. But I think there are applications where AI is used, and as a consumer, it's AI, but you don't really recognize it is AI. And let me explain that a little bit. So, for example, as a consumer in Netflix, you know that the next best recommendation for you is based on algorithms in the background, data on what you've watched, and a little bit of AI pushing some content and that sort of thing. So it's almost like you're blind to it, but it's happening.
Yeah.
For me, it's how do we get to that space in sort of customer service? I think where they're talking about the death of the customer, it's not necessarily customer experience per se, but perhaps customer service, where if you think of the use cases around this, perhaps it's where something's gone wrong, and the customer's trying to resolve more of a complaint or fraud or something that is more of an emotive use case.
Yeah.
I think, and I think this is where, for me, there is a balance. I think it's an extreme statement, but I think I can see where they're heading towards, because if you don't get the use case right and you use AI in the wrong way, and you don't put those guardrails for your organization around it. So, we can talk about preventing, by not using a true open AI model, or, use your own model rather than a public model, however you want to do that. But I think there are also the term guardrail. I think there are things you can do within the customer journey design to protect this, and being very considerate around the use cases as well.
Yeah. And interestingly, the first thing that Gartner have come up with in terms of, I suppose, preventing this is to limit customer-facing use cases and actually focus more on investments in agents and employee-facing technology. I think that's the way that they are kind of leading this, and how they are instructing leaders out there to say, actually limit it. Do you agree with that statement?
It's an interesting one. I think I do. So I think there are risks right now, and I think we have to be cautious right now. But as with anything, it's a change curve that we're on, and it's continuously evolving. And I wouldn't want to put a stake in the ground and say, limit it completely until 2027, because I think things are just moving so rapidly. I think, an example, I was talking to a customer about how they're using large language models, and for them, rather than plugging them straight into a customer facing bot, they're using them to enhance the NLU within the bot. So if the NLU doesn't understand what the customer has said, within a split second, it will send that in the background to their LLM, which will then translate it to something the bot understands. The bot then understands what the customer's saying and sends the right response. I think that's an interesting way of using these models, and using it that isn't a potential detriment of a customer-facing example. Naturally, we're hearing a lot about sort of, agent and background use cases. Absolutely. I think if we can't get the end goal, which is utilizing it to benefit the customer directly, then how can we benefit the customer in other ways within their journey? So it's not an all-in yes, I agree from me. I think it's a bold statement, but I think it's something to be considerate about when we're looking at customer journey mapping.
Yeah, it certainly makes a difference, doesn't it? And I think there's an element of fear there, and not letting the kind of fear dictate how you end up kind of executing against these things. And as long as you've got the right measures and the controls, and you've got trust and safety built into how you deliver this, and actually there's vendors out there that are helping organizations ensure that these kind of governance tools are in place to mitigate against these things. So I think that the technology is definitely evolving. The bottom line is it can't come at the detriment of the consumer experience, because it could end up causing more damage than actually good. So there's definitely risk there. Let's look at the future then. Let's kind of conclude on where we think this stuff's going, and let's forget all these the risks and everything else, and really think about pushing the boundaries with where we could end up in terms of we've spoken about contact centers being considered a cost center Could AI actually flip this completely to driving actual revenue for businesses? What's your view on what the future could look like?
So I think yes, there is potential to do that, and I think technology and AI can definitely support. So I was talking about this last week, actually, thinking about, from a digital twin perspective, what does that look like in a contact center? Is there potential that some more of the customer service side of things could be brought into and managed by digital twins, so we can utilize human agents in more of a sales modality? And actually, how do we connect the customer journey? We spoke about earlier, it should be the same experience regardless of where you enter the journey. If there's sort of VR technology, augmented reality, all that sort of stuff, that from a retail branch perspective, mixed in with a contact center agent, how do we blend those technologies to create a really cool, and I don't know what this looks like, it's I'm just thinking about it now, but how do we create a really cool end-to-end experience that's immersive for a customer, particularly when it comes to sales, particularly when it comes to an experience? Holiday booking, for example, I can't decide on where I want to go, so how do you immerse me in 10 minutes of 4 different locations so I can get a feel for what it is that I want to do and make a choice that way, rather than just have a look at a few photos on a website and ring a contact center and book the holiday.
It's kind of delivering a bit of an immersive experience, isn't it? Where we know with things like augmented reality, I recently had a demo of the Apple Vision Pro. Honestly, it was one of the best experiences I've had in that type of setting, where I've used a lot of like Oculus and virtual devices, but this was good because it's genuinely, for me, it augments the real life experience, and that's what I think what keeps you in touch with the reality of what's going on. But it'll definitely be interesting, I think, to see how I think contact centers will evolve into something different completely. And just going back to the point around these agents being able to, because they can offer more value to the consumer, I think it will make agents more valuable. I think that skill set will evolve and there'll be better earning potential for them. So I think it's great for the industry in that sense, because there is definitely a drive to deliver that richer experience back to the consumer. But as these rich modes of collaborating and communicating gets better, I think we can start to see how that could evolve. And then obviously AI will continue to play a huge role in it. The digital twin is an interesting concept, right? I mean, Eric Duan, our CEO, kind of talked about this on a podcast recently. Do you think there's legs in that? Like, I mean, it's again, it sounds quite crazy and out there, but we know the technology's kind of there now to deliver this.
And if you think about how they're used in other environments, it tends to be, from a prediction perspective, what could happen, what would if I did this, what would the outcome be? If I did that, what could so I'm thinking, is there potential to use it more from an agent training perspective? Is there a possibility that we can as AI takes more of the easy quick win stuff away, and we're left with perhaps some emotive challenging conversations, how do we simulate that experience and let an agent realize if they took one avenue with it, what would happen versus if they took another? I think those sorts of use cases are sort of safe to test because they're not going to be at the detriment of the customer experience. But actually, if it worked, there's potential where those agents can then upskill, feel the reality of something like that happening, feel the reality of if they got it wrong versus if they got it right. Again, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I think that would be a really cool thing to have as we develop into more upskilled human agents.
No, I think it's a good point. I've seen some technologies like this used in sales organizations where they'll use AI to train people. I think where it becomes interesting is when it's using real life data and almost predicting what's actually important for agents and people to kind of learn from, almost kind of be predicting the future to an extent, right? And I think that's where, when you look ahead, that's the real benefits of what AI. I know there's lots of data models out there that can help predict what's going to happen, but actually AI can actually start to automate certain things and execute against them before things happen. And I think that's where things can become really interesting, where you're anticipating change, whether that's because a change with the economy, because there's an election that's happening and the impact that's going to have on various different things, right? That's going that's going to occur. So being the AI being aware of what's happening, not just within the organization, but actually in the consumer's world. Why are they interested in buying your product? It's because of X, Y, and Z, and being able to use that data to deliver real value. So I'm certainly, from my perspective, I'm really excited to see where this ends up. I think we've got a long way to go yet before we start seeing the real benefits, but really appreciate your kind of insight around this. I just want to kind of conclude on the last thing that I do with all my guests is I'd love for you to share an example of an experience that you've witnessed that kind of left you feeling great. This could be perhaps an experience that was handled by AI potentially. But yeah, if there's an experience you'd love to share with the audience, that'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, great. I'm going to share two, if you don't mind, Iqbal, because I think it will bring to life a little bit what we've discussed around when is the right time to use AI and sort of use case examples from a customer perspective. Both, you're going to get an insight into my hobbies here. Both are to do with traveling and holidaying.
Yeah.
But the first was a bot that I used on Devere Group, and all I was looking, I didn't really know where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to go to the UK. I knew I needed a hotel. I knew I needed to take my dog and my 2-year-old little boy. But other than that, I was just like, not really sure what we want to do. And their bot, it was interesting because they're clearly using some sort of open source model. It was completely, I mean, I might be wrong. Someone from Devere might watch this and be like, no, we're not. But it was completely conversational. And what was great about it was I said to them, right, recommend me a hotel. It recommended me a hotel. Okay, is my dog good to go to that hotel? No, this isn't dog friendly, but this hotel is. So it's already making sort of recommendations based on the input that I was having. I've got a 2-year-old boy. Is that the right hotel? Yeah, this is great. And by the way, Cotswold Wildlife Park is just round the corner. So it'd be ideal, and it's dog friendly.
Wow.
So it was brilliant because it was listening to my inputs and then responding and making suggestions before I'd even thought of what I was going to ask next.
Yeah.
That was really cool. And a great way for me to sort of figure out where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do without having a lot of sort of prior thought to it. On the flip side, recently booked a holiday through Virgin Holidays, and they have a bot on their website, and very basic, click button through, want to book a holiday. They also have, as a lot of organizations do that are selling a product or a service, a self-serve web journey. And again, I might be completely wrong here. Someone from Virgin Holidays might tell me, what are you talking about? But it seems like they had thought about their customer journey in the fact that if Laura's come into a bot on a page where she could just self-serve this holiday, it's maybe not the right thing to keep her in a chat bot to go through a sales journey. And they actually offered me an uplift. They offered me 3 options: a call center, a branch, or a video appointment. So the nearest branch for me is an hour and a half. I didn't want the in-person, the sort of the voice. I wanted to see somebody. It's a big holiday. We're booking to Florida, and I needed the advice. So for them to then realize that's not best done within a chatbot, that needs a human touch, that personalized touch, and offer me the appointment via video so that I didn't have to travel into a branch, but I could do all of the same things, whether it was video, whether it was telephony, whether it was branch based or self-serve on the web. Again, that was really great because it just meant that I wasn't stuck in that traditional bot cycle when I knew that I didn't really know exactly what I wanted from the self-serve web journey, but they didn't just stick me in a call queue either. They gave me the option to go into more of a personalized video environment. So I know there's two very different examples there, but I think it just highlights sometimes that human personal touch is just as important as utilizing AI.
Yeah, and on the last example, I love that, by the way, but there's risks associated with what they've done there, because what's happened is if you're scheduling a video call with them, say in a couple of days, you've got time to rethink perhaps what you're going to do. Maybe you'll go onto a different website, find a better deal, and maybe have somebody who's available to speak with you there and then. So the fact that Virgin have taken a chance on potentially losing you as a customer is interesting, because actually what they know is you also appreciate that you're going to need time and you're going to need a lot of advice before you make that decision and that investment in this holiday. So they must have had metrics or something to be able to offer those capabilities, because it's much easier for them to get you to to buy a holiday right now and get you to commit now, because that's guaranteed revenue for the business. So yeah, so I think that's definitely interesting there. And then just back to your previous point, there's loads of great apps. I came across one called Meet Layla. I don't know if you've seen that. So Meet Layla's free AI travelers app, and you basically put in exactly what your situation is, where you're going, and what you need. And when my family and I went, I did a whole paragraph, because it's all about prompt engineering, right? You gotta put the right information in to get the right information back. So I just told it everything about who we are, my family, the age demographics, the kind of stuff we like doing, all on one chat, and then it came up with an itinerary. Honestly, it was I was shocked. So just very similar to the experience that you've had there, and it just saves time, because we actually did some of the stuff that it came up with, like not everything, but just it took into consideration every single thing that I had asked. And for me to go away and search that in Google and different websites, it'd just be forever. So yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that with me, and appreciate your time today. Honestly, it was very, very insightful. And hopefully you'll join me again soon, to no doubt to talk about where AI is going next. So yeah, thank you. Thanks again, Laura. See you soon.
Bye.